My dad told me I was not welcome at Thanksgiving because my presence made my sister-in-law uncomfortable. He said I did not fit the image they wanted to present to her wealthy parents. Then in the same breath, he asked me to wire $10,000 to pay for the very dinner I was banned from attending. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply hung up the phone. Then I opened my banking app, removed my name from the deed to the $1.5 million mansion they were living in, and canceled every single credit card in their wallets. When they called back 105 times begging for mercy, I was already sipping champagne in a first-class seat bound for Paris. My name is Simone, and at 32 years old, I thought I was done being the family doormat. If you have ever been treated like a walking ATM by the people who are supposed to love you, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Trust me, you want to hear how this ends because revenge is a dish best served cold and expensive. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and the air conditioning in the conference room was humming. I was sitting at the head of a long glass table overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Across from me sat 3 men in expensive suits sweating through their shirts. We were in the final stages of closing a deal for a commercial complex worth $40 million. This was my world. In this room, I was not a daughter or a sister. I was a shark. I was the person you came to when you needed capital, and I was the person who decided if you survived the fiscal year. My assistant Marcus slid a bottle of sparkling water toward me. I was in the zone focused entirely on the terms of the contract. Then my phone buzzed against the glass table. I glanced down. The name Otis was flashing on the screen. My father. My heart did a familiar stutter step in my chest. Otis never called during work hours. He knew my schedule. He knew that when I was in meetings, I was unreachable. The only times he called in the middle of the day were emergencies. I remembered the last time he called at this hour was when my mother Joyce had a minor car accident. Panic flared in my gut. I held up a hand to the investors, signaling for a moment of silence. "Excuse me, gentlemen," I said, keeping my voice level. "I have to take this. It is my father." The men nodded respectfully. I swiped the green icon and brought the phone to my ear, expecting a frantic voice, expecting bad news about a hospital visit or a fall. "Hello, Dad, is everything okay?" There was no panic in his voice. There was no emergency. Instead, there was that familiar preachery tone, the deep baritone he used from the pulpit for 30 years to command attention and demand obedience. It was the voice he used when he was about to deliver bad news disguised as holy wisdom. "Simone, listen to me. We have been talking as a family about Thanksgiving." I exhaled slowly, feeling the adrenaline fade, only to be replaced by a low, simmering anxiety. Thanksgiving was 3 days away. I had already cleared my schedule, which was no small feat. I had ordered the cases of vintage wine my brother Kendrick liked. I had even bought a new dress. "Okay," I said, leaning back in my leather chair. "What about it? Do you need me to come early to help Mom with the prep?" There was a pause on the line, a heavy, awkward silence that told me everything I needed to know before he even said the words. "No, Simone. Actually, that is what I am calling about. You do not need to come down this year. In fact, we think it is best if you do not come at all." I blinked, staring at the Atlanta traffic crawling on the highway below. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. "Excuse me." Otis cleared his throat. "It is complicated. Emily parents are flying in from Connecticut. The Sterlings. You know how they are. Very traditional, very upper crust. They have certain expectations about family and status. To be honest, Simone, your lifestyle makes Emily feel pressure." My lifestyle? I almost laughed. By lifestyle, he meant my independence. He meant the fact that I was a self-made millionaire who did not rely on a man to pay my bills. He meant the fact that I refused to bow down to my brother Kendrick, who was the golden child of the family, despite never having held a job for longer than 6 months. He continued, his voice gaining confidence, as if he were making a reasonable business proposal. "Kendrick needs this dinner to go perfectly. He is going to ask Mr. Sterling for a seed investment for his new venture. We need the atmosphere to be cohesive. Emily feels that when you are around with your attitude and your way of looking at things, it creates tension. We just think it is best if you stay in the city this year. Maybe you can work. You always love to work, right? I sat there stunned. I was being exiled. I was being uninvited from my own family dinner so my incompetent brother could play pretend businessman with his father-in-law. They wanted to hide me. They were ashamed of me not because I was a failure but because I was too successful in a way that made Kendrick look small. And in the Freeman family, making Kendrick feel big was the only religion that mattered. I gripped the phone tighter. So let me get this straight. I am not invited because Emily parents are snobs, and Kendrick needs to scam them for money. Watch your mouth, Simone Otis snapped. See, this is exactly the attitude I am talking about. You are bitter. You should be happy for your brother. He is finally making big moves. We are just asking you to step back and let him shine for one night. It is a sacrifice for the family. A sacrifice. I looked around the conference room. My name was on the building directory. My signature moved millions of dollars. And yet to my father, I was just a prop that needed to be removed from the stage so the star of the show could perform. I took a deep breath. Fine, if that is what you want. I will stay in Atlanta. I was about to hang up. I was ready to end the call and go scream in the bathroom. But then came the kicker. The part that actually made the air leave the room. Good. I am glad you are being reasonable for once, Otis said, his voice lightening. Oh, and Simone, one more thing. Do not forget to wire the 10,000 for the catering. Emily wants that Michelin star chef again, the one you hired last year. The deposit is due at 5 today. Also, Mom needs you to cover the wine delivery. Just send it to the joint account, like usual. I froze. The request hung in the air like a foul smell. He did not just uninvite me. He uninvited me and then presented me with the bill. They wanted the five-star food. They wanted the vintage wine. They wanted the luxury experience that I paid for, but they did not want me. They wanted my wallet, but not my face. I looked at my reflection in the glass table. I saw a woman who had built an empire from nothing. A woman who had carried this family on her back for a decade. I bought the house they lived in. I paid the country club fees. I covered Kendrick gambling debts. And this was my reward, to be treated like a ghost who signed checks. Are you sure, Dad? I asked quietly. My voice was steady but cold. Is this your final decision? You are asking me to pay for a party I am banned from attending. Otis sighed impatient. Don't make this dramatic, Simone. It is just money. You have plenty of it. God has blessed you financially so you can bless your family. Be a good sister, support your brother, send the money by 5. We will see you at Christmas, maybe. He did not wait for an answer. He assumed the answer was yes. He assumed I was the same desperate little girl who would pay any price for a scrap of their affection. He hung up. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. The conference room was silent. The investors were looking at me with concern. They saw the shift in my demeanor. They saw the professional mask slip just enough to reveal the absolute fury burning underneath. Is everything all right, Ms. Freeman? One of them asked. I looked up at him. I stood up and buttoned my blazer. My hands were not shaking. In fact, I had never felt calmer in my life. It was a cold clarity, the kind of clarity you get when you realize the tumor is malignant and needs to be cut out. Gentlemen, I apologize, I said, my voice smooth as silk. Something has come up. My assistant Marcus will finalize the signatures with you. The terms are non-negotiable. I turned to Marcus, who had been standing in the corner monitoring my schedule. Marcus had been with me for 5 years. He knew my family history. He knew how much I gave them. He saw the look in my eyes. It was not sadness. It was the look of a scorched earth policy. Marcus walked over, his tablet ready. Yes, Simone. I looked him dead in the eye. Cancel the transfer to Otis Freeman. Cancel the catering for Thanksgiving. Call the wine distributor and redirect the shipment to my penthouse. Marcus raised an eyebrow, but his fingers were already flying across the screen. Done. Anything else? Yes, I said, walking toward the door. Access the family management portal. Revoke their access to the black card. Close the expense accounts for Kendrick Business. And Marcus contact the utilities company for the Buckhead property. The Buckhead property? Marcus asked, pausing. Your parents' house. My house, I corrected him. It has always been my house. Cut the power, cut the water, cut the internet. Tell them the owner has terminated the service agreement effective immediately. Marcus looked at me, a small smile playing on his lips. He typed the command. The authorization went through. I walked out of the conference room and down the hall toward the elevator. My phone started ringing again. It was Otis. Then it was my mother. Then Kendrick. I did not look at it. I tossed the phone into my designer bag and pressed the button for the lobby. The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off the noise of the office. For the first time in my life, I was not going home for Thanksgiving. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. The war had started, and they had no idea they had just fired on a nuclear power. While I was sitting in my office calmly dismantling their financial safety net, my mother Joyce and my sister-in-law Emily were walking into L'Eclat, one of the most exclusive boutiques in Buckhead. They had no idea that the ground beneath their feet had already crumbled. To them, this was just another Tuesday afternoon of spending money they did not earn. Emily loved L'Eclat because the staff treated her like royalty. They offered her sparkling water with lemon slices the moment she walked through the glass doors. They complimented her hair, which she spent $400 a week maintaining, and they nodded eagerly at her opinions on the latest fashion trends. Emily thrived on this validation. She needed to feel superior, and spending my money was her favorite way to achieve that high. My mother trailed behind her, happy to be included in the orbit of her daughter-in-law. Joyce had always been desperate for Emily approval. She saw Emily as the prize the Freeman family had won. A girl from a wealthy Connecticut family with blue blood and high connections. My mother was willing to do anything to keep Emily happy, even if it meant throwing her own daughter under the bus. Emily stopped in front of a mannequin, displaying a floor-length gown. It was a shimmering silk masterpiece in deep emerald green. The fabric looked like liquid money. "Oh, Joyce, look at this!" Emily gasped, running her manicured fingers over the silk. "This is it. This is the dress for Thanksgiving dinner. My mother loves emerald green. It brings out my eyes." Joyce clasped her hands together in delight. "It is stunning, Emily. You will look like a queen. It is absolutely perfect for hosting the Sterlings." Emily checked the price tag and smirked. $5,500. Not bad. Simone would probably have a heart attack if she saw the price, but who cares, right? She is not even invited. They both laughed. A cruel, conspiratorial laugh that echoed in the quiet store. "Exactly," Joyce agreed. "Simone is just so stingy sometimes. She does not understand that quality costs money. She would probably wear one of those boring pantsuits anyway. It is better she stays away. We do not need her negativity bringing down the mood." Emily signaled to a sales associate, a young woman named Sarah, who had helped them ring up thousands of dollars in merchandise over the past year. Sarah rushed over, smiling. "I need this in a size 4, Emily commanded, handing over the dress. "And grab those diamond earrings in the display case, too. The ones with the teardrop shape. I deserve a little treat for dealing with all the stress of planning this dinner." "Of course, Mrs. Freeman," Sarah said, taking the items to the counter. "Will that be all for today?" "Yes, just these," Emily said, walking to the register with her chin held high. She opened her designer purse and pulled out the heavy titanium black card. It was an American Express Centurion card, the ultimate status symbol. It had my name on the account, but Emily carried a supplementary card with her husband Kendrick's name on it. She loved the sound it made when she slapped it onto the marble countertop. That heavy metallic clink that told the world she was important. "Put it on the family account," Emily said, waving her hand dismissively. Sarah inserted the chip into the reader. The machine beeped. Processing. Emily leaned against the counter, checking her reflection in the mirror behind the register. She adjusted her collar, unaware that her life was about to implode. The machine beeped again. A harsh, low tone. Sarah frowned. "I am sorry, Mrs. Freeman. It says chip read error. Let me try swiping it." Emily rolled her eyes. "Honestly, these machines are so sensitive. Just hurry up. I have a spa appointment at 4. Sarah swiped the card. The machine thought for a second, and then beeped that same harsh tone. Declined. The word flashed on the small screen facing the clerk, but Emily did not see it yet. Sarah looked uncomfortable. She tried manually entering the numbers. Declined. Mrs. Freeman. Sarah said, her voice dropping to a discreet whisper. "The card is not going through. It is giving me a code I have not seen before." Emily huffed loud enough for the other 2 customers in the store to hear. "What do you mean, not going through?" "That is a black card. It has no limit. Do not be ridiculous. Try it again." "I have tried 3 times," Sarah said politely. "It is being declined by the issuer. Do you have another form of payment?" Emily's face flushed a shade of pink that clashed with her lipstick. "This is embarrassing. There must be something wrong with your system. My husband just paid the bill yesterday. Here, let me call him." She pulled out her phone, but before she could dial, the store manager walked over. He was a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit who usually greeted Emily with a warm handshake. Today his face was grim. He looked at the screen on the register and then looked at Emily with cold professional detachment. "Mrs. Freeman," the manager said, his voice projecting clearly across the silent boutique. "The code on the register is 04. That is the code for a stolen or lost card reported by the primary account holder." The silence in the store was deafening. The other customers stopped browsing and turned to watch. Emily dropped her phone. It clattered onto the marble floor. "Stolen!" she shrieked. "How dare you? This is my husband's card. My sister-in-law pays the bill. She would never report it stolen." The manager did not blink. "The system requires us to confiscate the card immediately. Please hand it over, Mrs. Freeman, or I will have to call security." "Confiscate it?" Emily's voice cracked. She looked around wildly, seeing the judgment in everyone's eyes. She looked at Joyce for help. "Joyce, do something. Tell them who we are." Joyce stepped forward, clutching her pearls nervously. "Sir, there must be a mistake. We are the Freemans. We spend thousands here every month. My daughter Simone is the one who manages the accounts. Maybe she just pressed the wrong button online. Here, use my card." Joyce pulled out her own platinum card, also linked to my main account. She handed it to the manager with a trembling hand. "Just put the dress and the earrings on this one. We will sort out the other card later." The manager took Joyce's card. He did not even swipe it. He simply looked at the number and typed it into his terminal to check the status. "Frozen," he said flatly. "This account has been frozen by the primary holder as of 2:30 this afternoon. All associated cards are invalid." Joyce's face went pale. "Frozen? But that is impossible. Simone would never—" She stopped. The realization hit her like a physical slap. The phone call. The demand for $10,000. The uninvitation. Emily snatched her card back from the counter before the manager could take it, but it did not matter. The plastic was useless. "You are kicking us out!" Emily screamed, her humiliation turning into rage. "You are kicking us out over a banking glitch. Do you know who my father is? He is Arthur Sterling. He could buy this entire building and turn it into a parking lot." "We are not kicking you out," the manager said calmly, signaling for the security guard near the door. "But we cannot release the merchandise without payment. And since both cards are flagged for suspicious activity, I am going to have to ask you to leave until you can provide a valid form of payment. Please leave the items on the counter." The security guard, a large man with crossed arms, took a step forward. Emily looked at the dress, the emerald green silk that was supposed to make her the star of Thanksgiving. She looked at the diamond earrings. Then she looked at the security guard. She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the store, tears of rage streaming down her face. Joyce scrambled after her, head bowed, trying to hide her face from the staring customers. Outside on the sidewalk, the humid Atlanta air hit them. Emily was shaking. "Call Kendrick," she screamed at Joyce. "Call him right now." Right? That witch. That jealous, bitter witch. She cut us off. She actually cut us off. Joyce was already dialing Kendrick's number. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped the phone once before connecting. Kendrick was across town at a luxury car dealership. He had been looking at a new Porsche Cayenne, intending to lease it to impress Mr. Sterling. He was sitting in the plush leather office of the sales manager, ready to sign the paperwork. The sales manager had just run his credit check. Mr. Freeman, the manager, had said, sliding the paper across the desk. "I am afraid we have a problem. Your credit score just dropped 80 points in the last hour, and the credit line you listed as your primary income source, the one from Freeman Holdings, it shows as terminated." Kendrick had laughed nervously. "That is a mistake. My sister runs that holding company. I am a partner." The manager had shaken his head. "The system shows you were removed as an authorized user this afternoon. Without that backing, you do not qualify for the lease. In fact, you do not qualify for a Honda Civic right now." Kendrick's phone rang. It was his mother. He answered it, his face burning with the same shame his wife was feeling 5 miles away. "Mom," he hissed, "what is going on? The dealership just said my credit is dead." "It is." "Simone." Joyce sobbed into the phone on the street corner. "She cut the cards, Kendrick. She cut everything. Emily was humiliated at the boutique. They almost called the police on us." Kendrick gripped the phone, his knuckles turned white. "Where is she?" "She is not answering," Joyce wailed. "We called her 50 times. It goes straight to voicemail." "Kendrick, what are we going to do? The Sterlings are coming in 3 days. We have no food, we have no wine, and now we have no money to buy any of it." Kendrick looked at the sales manager, who was already packing up the paperwork and looking at his watch, clearly done with wasting time on a broke client. "She thinks she can play games," Kendrick said, his voice low and dangerous. "She thinks she can embarrass us like this." He hung up and dialed my number again. And again. And again. I watched my phone screen light up from the comfort of my penthouse balcony. 53 missed calls. 102 text messages. The notifications rolled in like a tide. Threats, begging, cursing, then begging again. I took a sip of my wine, the vintage Cabernet they had wanted me to buy for them. It tasted like victory. I did not block them. Not yet. I wanted to see the desperation. I wanted to see them realize that without the host, the parasites begin to starve. The sun was setting over Atlanta, casting long shadows over the city. Down there somewhere, my family was panicking. Up here, everything was quiet. But I knew this was just the beginning. They would not give up this easily. They would come for me, and I would be ready. While my family was having a meltdown on the sidewalk outside the boutique, I was sitting in a room where emotions went to die. The law offices of Sterling and Vance were located on the 45th floor of the Sovereign Building. My attorney David sat across from me. He was a man of few words and expensive billable hours. Between us lay a stack of documents 3 inches thick. David adjusted his glasses and looked at me over the rim. He tapped the document on top. "This is the deed to the property at 450 Blackland Road, the Buckhead Estate, currently occupied by Otis and Joyce Freeman, along with Kendrick and Emily Freeman." I looked at the paper. It was just legal jargon and signatures, but it represented the biggest mistake of my life. 5 years ago, when I sold my first tech startup for 8 figures, the first thing I wanted to do was retire my parents. I bought the mansion for $1.5 million in cash. I put it in a revocable living trust with myself as the sole trustee. It was supposed to be a gift, a place for my parents to grow old in dignity. But that dignity did not last long. Within 3 months, Kendrick had moved into the master suite, claiming he needed a base of operations for his visionary business ideas. Within 6 months, Emily had redecorated the entire first floor, hiring contractors and sending the invoices to me. They stopped asking if they could stay. They simply took over. My parents moved into the guest wing to accommodate Kendrick's need for space. When I visited, I was treated like a guest in my own property. Emily would make passive-aggressive comments about me wiping my feet or not scratching the floors she had chosen. David pulled me back to the present. Simone, the trust documents are clear. You are the grantor and the trustee. They are guests. Tenants at will. They have no lease, no ownership, no legal standing. If you sign this, we are initiating the eviction process under Georgia law, but I need you to understand the nuclear fallout of this. Once we file this with the county, there is no going back. I reached for the pen. My hand was steady. I thought about the phone call with my father. I thought about the $10,000 he demanded for a dinner I was not good enough to attend. I thought about the way they looked at me like a bank vault that had the audacity to speak. It is not just eviction, David, I said, my voice flat. I want to terminate the lifestyle maintenance agreement, the utilities, the landscaping crew, the pool maintenance, the private security patrol. Everything is in my name. Everything stops today. David nodded solemnly. He respected the ruthless efficiency of it. He slid the papers toward me. Sign here, and initial the bottom of page 4. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the only sound in the room. It was a sharp, final sound. With every signature, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. I was not just signing legal documents, I was signing a Declaration of Independence. When the last page was signed, David took the file. I will have these filed with the court first thing tomorrow morning. Technically, we have to give them notice. I picked up my phone. I will give them notice right now. I opened my email app. I did not type a long, emotional letter. I did not list my grievances or ask for an apology. I knew that to people like Kendrick and Emily, feelings were just weaknesses to be exploited. I needed to speak the only language they understood. Legalese and money. Subject notice of financial termination. To Otis Freeman, Joyce. Freeman, Kendrick Freeman. Effective immediately. All financial support provided by Simone Freeman and the Freeman Family Trust is terminated. This includes but is not limited to credit card access, utility payments, property maintenance, and monthly allowances. As I have been informed that I am not a welcome member of this family, I am respecting your wishes by removing my presence entirely. This includes my financial presence. Please make arrangements to assume responsibility for all bills associated with your residence starting today. I read it over once. It was cold. It was professional. It was perfect. I hit send. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window looking out over the city. Somewhere down there in the sprawling suburbs of Buckhead phone, notifications were pinging. It took exactly 3 minutes. My phone vibrated on the conference table. Then it vibrated again, and again. It started to dance across the mahogany surface. I picked it up. A text from Kendrick. Are you insane? Open the cards back up right now. We are stuck at the gas station and the pump declined the fleet card. I watched the 3 dots appear as he typed furiously. You selfish butch. You want to humiliate me in front of Emily parents. Do you know who the Sterlings are? If I lose this deal because of your tantrum, I will never forgive you. Dad is having chest pains because of you. Fix this now. I stared at the words. He did not ask why. He did not say he was sorry. He did not even deny that they had uninvited me. He just demanded that I fix it. He used my father's health as a weapon, just like he always did. Another text came through. This time from Emily number, but written in all caps, so I knew she was shouting the words as she typed. You ruined my shopping trip. I had to leave the dress at the counter. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? Transfer $5,000 to my Venmo right now, and maybe we will let you come for dessert. I actually laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Even now, with the noose tightening around their necks, they were still trying to negotiate from a place of superiority. They thought this was a game. They thought I was just acting out and that eventually I would fold like I always did. They thought if they yelled loud enough, the ATM would start dispensing cash again. I looked at David. Do not answer any calls from them, I said. Direct everything to the firm. David smiled a shark smile. With pleasure. I walked out of the office and into the elevator. The texts kept coming. My mother sent a picture of herself crying. My father sent a Bible verse about honoring thy parents. Kendrick sent threats of physical violence. I deleted the thread without reading the rest. I stepped out into the cool evening air. The city lights were coming on. For the first time in 5 years, I did not have a family to go home to. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt like I could finally breathe. I got into my car and turned the radio up, drowning out the phantom sound of my phone buzzing. They wanted a Thanksgiving without me. Well, they were about to get exactly what they asked for. But they forgot that the turkey was not the only thing that was going to get carved up this year. The silence in my penthouse was absolute, and it was beautiful. From the 45th floor, the noise of Atlanta traffic was nothing more than a distant hum, a reminder that the chaotic world below could not touch me unless I let it. But while I sat on my velvet sofa, watching the city lights flicker on the chaos, was currently racing up Peachtree Road in a leased Mercedes-Benz. My father, Otis, and my brother Kendrick were coming for me. I knew it before the concierge even called. I knew it because I understood how their minds worked. To them, my email was not a boundary, it was a declaration of war. And in the Freeman family, war was fought with loud voices, intimidation, and the weaponized guilt of religious obligation. They were not coming to apologize. They were coming to force the ATM to start dispensing cash again. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water and picked up my iPad. I had a direct feed to the lobby security cameras. It was a feature I rarely used, but tonight it was my front row seat to the circus. On the screen, I saw Kendrick's car screech to a halt in the circular driveway. He parked crookedly, taking up 2 spaces right in front of the fountain. It was a small act of arrogance that summarized his entire existence. He stepped out, slamming the door, wearing a designer jacket that I had paid for 3 Christmases ago. Otis followed him, clutching his Bible like a shield. His face was twisted in that familiar, self-righteous scowl, the one he usually reserved for sinners and people who put less than $20 in the collection plate. They marched toward the glass doors with the entitlement of kings entering their castle. They expected the automatic doors to part. They expected the staff to bow. They expected to breeze past the front desk and take the private elevator straight up to my sanctuary, where they would bang on my door until I submitted. But the sovereign was not my parents' house. It was a fortress of wealth and privacy, and tonight the drawbridge was up. I watched on the screen as they approached the front desk. Charles, the head concierge, was on duty. Charles was a former British military officer who stood 6'4" and had zero patience for foolishness. He looked up from his computer as Otis slammed his hand onto the marble counter. I could not hear the audio through the iPad, but I did not need to. I could read my father's body language perfectly. He was pointing at the ceiling, he was shouting, he was demanding to see Simone Freeman immediately. I saw Charles say something calm and professional. He likely asked for their names. Otis gestured wildly at Kendrick. Kendrick leaned over the counter, invading Charles' personal space, trying to use his physical size to intimidate. It was a tactic that worked on his wife Emily, and it worked on our mother Joyce. But Charles did not flinch. He simply typed something into his computer, checked the list, and shook his head. My phone rang. It was the landline connected to the concierge desk. I picked it up. Ms. Freeman. I apologize for the disturbance, Charles said, his voice crisp and unbothered. I have 2 gentlemen here in the lobby, an Otis and Kendrick Freeman. They claim to be your father and brother. They are quite agitated and are demanding access to your unit. I looked at the screen. Otis was now pacing back and forth, waving his arms. Kendrick was filming the interaction on his phone, probably hoping to post it online to shame the building staff. They looked ridiculous. They looked small. For 30 years, these 2 men had controlled every aspect of my life. They had told me what to wear, what to study, and how to spend my money. They had made me feel like I took up too much space in the world. But looking at them now on a 5-inch screen, they were just two angry men shouting at a locked door. I took a sip of water. I felt a cold steeliness settle in my chest. This was the moment. The moment I stopped being their daughter and started being their landlord. Ms. Freeman Charles asked again, "Do you wish to grant them access?" I watched Otis point a finger in Charles' face. I saw the spit flying from his mouth. I saw the absolute lack of respect they had for anyone who stood in their way. I cleared my throat. "Charles, I am looking at the monitor. I have never seen those men before in my life." There was a brief pause on the line. A moment of professional understanding. Charles knew exactly who they were. He had seen them visit before. But he also knew what I was paying for. He was not just paid to open doors. He was paid to keep the wrong people out. "Understood," Ms. Freeman Charles said, without missing a beat. "I will handle it." I hung up and watched the show. Charles said something to them. I saw Otis freeze. His mouth fell open. Kendrick dropped his phone to his side. They could not believe it. The denial was absolute. It was not just that I was busy, it was that I had erased them. Otis' face turned a dangerous shade of purple. He lunged toward the elevator bank, trying to bypass the desk. That was a mistake. Charles pressed a button under the counter. Two uniformed security officers who had been standing discreetly by the pillars stepped forward. They were not the friendly mall cops my brother was used to dealing with. These were armed tactical security. They blocked the path to the elevators, creating a wall of muscle and Kevlar. Kendrick tried to push past one of them, shouting something that looked like, "Do you know who I am?" The guard grabbed Kendrick's arm. It was a swift professional movement. He twisted Kendrick's arm behind his back and marched him toward the revolving doors. Kendrick struggled, his expensive sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, but he was no match for a trained professional. Otis screamed, clutching his chest, trying to play the victim card. He yelled at the residents who were walking through the lobby, trying to garner sympathy. But the people living in the Sovereign valued privacy above all else. They looked at Otis with disdain, seeing only a loud intruder disrupting their evening. The second guard took Otis by the elbow. He did not rough him up, but he was firm. He guided my father toward the exit with the efficiency of a bouncer throwing out a drunk. I watched them get shoved out onto the sidewalk. The glass doors slid shut, locking them out. But they did not leave. Not yet. Through the exterior camera feed, I saw blue lights flashing. The Atlanta Police Department had arrived. Charles must have called them the moment Otis started shouting. Two police cruisers pulled up behind Kendrick's double-parked Mercedes. Officers stepped out, hands resting near their holsters. In this neighborhood, a disturbance in a luxury building was taken very seriously. I saw Otis trying to explain, trying to use his former title of Reverend to gain authority. He pointed up at my building. He pointed at the guards. But the police were not interested in his sermon. They were interested in the fact that he was trespassing on private property and causing a public disturbance. One officer wrote Kendrick a ticket for the illegal parking. Another officer spoke to Otis, his hand gesturing for him to get back in the vehicle. It was the ultimate humiliation. Otis Freeman, a man who prided himself on his reputation in the community, was being treated like a criminal in front of the city's wealthiest residents. He was being scolded like a child. I zoomed in on the screen. I could see the hate in Kendrick's eyes as he got into the driver's seat. He looked up at the building, scanning the windows, trying to find mine. He shouted something at the glass. I could not hear it, but I could read his lips. "You will pay for this." Otis got into the passenger seat, looking defeated and furious. He slammed the door so hard the car shook. As they drove away, followed by a police cruiser, to ensure they left the premises, I felt a strange sensation. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally standing up. I had just publicly disowned my family. I had subjected them to the same shame they had heaped on me for years. I turned off the iPad. The screen went black, reflecting my own face. I did not look sad. I looked relieved. But I knew this was not over. Humiliation does not make narcissists reflect on their behavior, it only makes them vindictive. They would not come back to my building. No, they would try to hit me where they thought it would hurt the most. My reputation, my image, my soul. I picked up my phone and saw a notification from a local community Facebook group, a post by Emily Freeman. My heartless sister-in-law evicted her own elderly parents and assaulted them with security guards. Please pray for our family as we deal with this monster. The post already had 20 likes. The smear campaign had begun. I smiled a cold, humorless smile. Emily had no idea who she was playing with. She thought Facebook likes were power. She forgot that I owned the internet provider she was using to post her lies. And tomorrow morning, she was going to find out that a lie travels halfway around the world, while the truth is putting on its boots. But my truth did not wear boots. It wore stiletto heels, and it was about to step on her neck. The morning sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, but the mood on my phone screen was pitch black. I woke up expecting silence after the previous night eviction attempt, but instead I found a digital riot. My notification center was overflowing. It wasn't business emails or investment updates. It was hate. Pure, unadulterated venom from people who had not spoken to me in years. I sat up in bed and opened the first message. It was from a cousin I had not seen since I was 12. It read, "You are a disgrace to the family name. How could you throw your own parents out on the street? I hope you rot in hell with all your dirty money." I frowned and opened the next one. This one was from my Aunt Sarah, who lived in Detroit. She wrote, "Your father was a man of God. He served the church for 40 years. You are possessed by greed, Simone. Repent before it is too late." I knew exactly where this was coming from. I did not need to be a detective to find the source. I opened Facebook, and there it was. Emily Freeman had been busy. At 3 in the morning, while I was sleeping, she had launched a nuclear strike on my reputation. She had written a long, emotional post tagged with 40 different prayer groups and community leaders. The picture attached was a blurry photo of my father Otis looking distraught outside my building next to a police car. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. "It is with a heavy heart that I ask for prayers for our family." Last night, my sister-in-law, Simone Freeman, physically assaulted her elderly parents and had them removed by police from the home they raised her in. We have just discovered that she has been using illegal business practices to fund her lavish lifestyle, and now she has abandoned the very people who sacrificed everything for her. We are homeless and heartbroken. Please pray for Otis and Joyce as they face this betrayal from their own daughter. I stared at the words. Illegal business practices. That was the line that crossed the boundary from family drama to legal defamation. Emily knew exactly what she was doing. In our community, and especially in the church circles where my father held sway, the accusation of dirty money was a death sentence. It implied I was a criminal. It implied that my success was not earned but stolen. It was designed to destroy my professional credibility. I went deeper into the comments. The thread was on fire. Members of the Greater Ebenezer Baptist Church, where my father had served as a pastor, were calling for my head. They were calling me a Jezebel. They were saying I had sold my soul for a penthouse. Then I saw the screenshots from the church WhatsApp group called the Ladies of Grace. My mother Joyce was active in there. She was playing the role of the martyr perfectly. "I just do not know where we went wrong," Joyce had typed to the group. "We gave her everything. We prayed for her. And now she treats us like strangers. She even cut off the money for the church donation drive. She has turned her back on God." That was the final straw. They were using the church. They were using the very institution that I had been quietly supporting for years to paint me as a villain. They relied on the fact that I was private. They banked on my silence. They thought that because I never bragged about my donations, no one knew where the money actually came from. They were wrong. I got out of bed and walked to my home office. I did not reply to the hate messages. I did not make a counter post on Facebook defending myself. Arguing with fools in public only proves there are two fools. I had a much more effective way to handle this. I sat down at my desk and opened my secure banking portal. I navigated to the search history. I filtered the results for the last 5 years. I started downloading PDF statements, every single transfer, every single check, every single bill payment. I compiled a document. It was 80 pages long. Page 1 showed the $1.5 million purchase of the house in Buckhead, paid in full by Simone Freeman. Page 10 showed the monthly transfers of $10,000 to Otis and Joyce Freeman labeled living allowance. Page 20 showed the tuition payments for Emily's student loans, which I had paid off as a wedding gift to my brother. Page 30 showed the $50,000 I had wired to the church building fund 2 years ago under the name Anonymous Donor, but linked clearly to my account. Page 40 showed the car payments for the Mercedes Kendrick was driving. Page 50 showed the invoices for Emily designer wardrobe, which she claimed she bought with her own money. I merged all the files into a single dossier. I named the file The Truth About the Freeman Finances. Then I opened my email client. I did not send it to my family. There was no point in showing them what they already knew. I needed to show the people who mattered, the people who held the power in my father world. I typed in the email address of Bishop Thomas. He was the head of the church board, the man who controlled the reputation of every deacon and pastor in the city. He was a man who valued integrity and financial transparency above all else. Subject regarding the accusations made by the Freeman family. Dear Bishop Thomas, I hope this email finds you well. It has come to my attention that there are rumors circulating within the congregation regarding my character and the financial situation of my parents, Otis and Joyce Freeman. I have been accused of abandoning them and funding my life through illegal means. As a woman of faith and a business professional, I value the truth. Attached, you will find the complete financial records of my support for my family over the last 5 years, totaling over $2 million. You will also find the records of my anonymous donations to the church. My parents are not homeless. They are currently residing in a home I paid for and have lived on an allowance I provided. The decision to sever ties was made due to repeated financial abuse and disrespect. I am sharing this with you not for public gossip, but so that the leadership of the church has the full context before taking any official stance. Please pray for my family as they learn to navigate life without my financial assistance. Sincerely, Simone Freeman. I hit send. I sat back in my chair. I knew exactly what would happen next. Bishop Thomas was a gossip in his own right, but he was also a man who hated being lied to. When he saw that Otis Freeman, the man who preached about humility and hard work, had been living entirely off his daughter money for half a decade, the respect would evaporate. When he saw that Emily was lying about my business dealings, he would shut down the prayer chains immediately. In the African American church community, reputation is currency. Otis Freeman had just spent his last dime. My phone rang again. It was another cousin probably calling to scream at me. I silenced it and turned the phone face down. I walked to the kitchen and made myself a cup of coffee. The campaign of destruction was underway, but it wasn't my destruction. It was theirs. They wanted to drag my name through the mud, but they forgot that I owned the ground they were standing on. By noon, the tone of the messages began to change. The hate comments on Facebook stopped appearing, then the post itself was deleted. Apparently, Bishop Thomas had made a phone call. I took a sip of my coffee. The silence returned to my penthouse, but this time it felt different. It felt like the calm before the final storm. I knew they would be desperate now. Their social capital was gone. Their financial capital was gone. All they had left was the Thanksgiving dinner with the Sterlings. That was their last stand, and they had no idea that I was about to crash the party. 3 days before Thanksgiving, the weather in Atlanta took a sharp turn. A cold front swept down from the north, dropping temperatures into the low 30s. In my penthouse, the climate was controlled by a smart thermostat set to a perfect 72 degrees. But over in Buckhead at the house I legally owned, the atmosphere was about to get much colder in more ways than one. I was sitting in my home office monitoring the situation remotely. I had received a notification from the utility provider at 4 in the afternoon. It was a simple automated message stating service disconnection completed. It was the digital equivalent of a guillotine blade dropping. At that exact moment, Emily was in the middle of a performance. She was on FaceTime with her parents, the Sterlings, walking them through the main floor of the mansion. She held her phone up high, finding the best lighting to show off the crystal chandelier in the foyer. She was wearing a white cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car, and she was smiling that tight, practiced smile she used when she wanted to prove she was winning at life. "Oh, Mother, you just have to see the dining room," Emily cooed into the phone. "We had the drapes custom made in France. Kendrick and I really wanted to elevate the space before you arrived. We have been working so hard on these renovations." She was lying, of course. The drapes were from a local store, and I had paid for them 3 years ago. But Emily lived in a reality of her own making, where every nice thing she touched became her creation. Her father, Arthur Sterling, was on the other end of the line, sitting in his library in Connecticut. "That is impressive, Emily," he said, his voice tinny through the phone speakers. "It sounds like Kendrick is finally stepping up. I am looking forward to seeing this estate he keeps talking about. He calls it the Freeman compound." Emily giggled, twirling around in the living room. "We are just so blessed. Oh, let me show you the fireplace. We are going to have a roaring fire going when you get here." She walked toward the massive stone fireplace, the centerpiece of the living room. She was just about to frame the shot when it happened. It wasn't a bang. It was a sudden, oppressive silence. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen died. The soft whir of the HVAC system pumping warm air through the vents cut out. The crystal chandelier above her head flickered once and then went dark. And most importantly, the Wi-Fi router located in the hallway closet lost power. On Emily's phone screen, the image of her parents froze. The connection icon spun in a desperate circle, and then the call failed. "Hello," Emily said, tapping the screen. "Mom, Dad, can you hear me?" She looked up. The house was plunging into the gray gloom of a winter afternoon. Without the interior lights, the large room suddenly felt cavernous and intimidating. "Kendrick," she screamed. "Kendrick," the lights went out. Kendrick was in the kitchen trying to raid the fridge for a beer. He was already on edge. He had spent the last 2 days dodging calls from the car dealership and trying to find a way to get cash without working for it. When the refrigerator light died, he slammed the door shut. "It is probably just a fuse," he yelled back, trying to sound authoritative. "This old house has bad wiring." Simone probably ignored the maintenance. He marched to the basement to check the breaker box. He flipped the main switch off and on. Nothing happened. He checked the sub-panels. Nothing. He pulled out his phone to use the flashlight. That was when he noticed he had no Wi-Fi. He checked his cellular data. He had 1 bar. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. He climbed back up the stairs where Emily was standing in the dark, hugging her arms. "It is freezing in here," she complained. "The heat is off too." "Kendrick, my parents are coming in 48 hours. You need to fix this. Call the power company." Kendrick dialed Georgia Power. He put it on speakerphone so his hands were free to check the thermostat again. The automated voice greeted him. "Thank you for calling Georgia Power. To make a payment, press 1. For outages, press 2. He pressed 2. "We are currently not detecting any widespread outages in your area," the voice said cheerfully. "If you are experiencing a loss of power, please hold for a representative." Kendrick waited. The hold music was a soft jazz that seemed to mock the rising panic in the room. Emily was pacing back and forth, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floors. Finally, a human voice came on the line. "Thank you for holding. I see you are calling about the property at 450 Blackland Road. Am I speaking with the account holder, Ms. Simone Freeman?" Kendrick stiffened. "No, this is her brother, Kendrick Freeman. The power just went out." Your machine said there are no outages, so what is going on? There was a pause. The sound of typing filled the silence. Sir, I see here that the service for this address was voluntarily disconnected by the account holder this afternoon. The final bill was generated and the account has been closed. Disconnected. Kendrick repeated, his voice cracking. What do you mean closed? Ms. Freeman requested a total cessation of services, the representative explained. Additionally, since the account is closed, the outstanding balance for the last 3 months of high usage, plus the early termination fees, and the deposit for a new connection, well, it is all due immediately if you wish to restore power. How much? Kendrick asked. He felt sick. To open a new account in your name and restore service today, you would need to clear the pending balance on the meter. The total is $5,240. $5,000, Emily shrieked. She grabbed the phone from the table. Why is the bill so high? And why is it in Simone's name? You told me you took over the bills last year. You told me this was our house. Kendrick snatched the phone back. Mom, this is a mistake. Just turn it back on. We will mail you a check. I cannot do that, sir. The representative said, her voice hardening. We need a valid credit card on file for the full amount. Would you like to process that now? Kendrick looked at Emily. He looked at the dark, cold house. He thought about his wallet, which contained 3 maxed-out credit cards and a debit card with less than $50 on it. I need to call you back, he whispered and hung up. The silence that followed was heavier than the darkness. The house was already losing heat. The large windows, which were great for views, were terrible for insulation. Emily stared at him. Her face was illuminated by the pale light of her cell phone. She looked like a ghost. You lied to me, she said. Her voice was quiet, dangerous. You told my father this was your estate. You told me you were handling the finances. Why is the power bill in Simone's name? Why did she turn it off? Kendrick scrambled for a lie. He was a master at improvisation, but the walls were closing in too fast. It is a glitch, babe, he stammered, backing away. Simone is just being petty. She is trying to sabotage us because she is jealous. She probably hacked the account. I will fix it. I just need to move some money around. My investment accounts are tied up in the merger right now, so I cannot access the cash instantly. You do not have $5,000, do you? Emily asked. The realization was dawning on her. You do not have the money. You do not own the house. You do not even pay the light bill. Of course I have the money, Kendrick shouted, trying to use anger to cover his fear. I am a partner in Freeman Holdings. I am just liquidating some assets. Look, I will go to the bank. I will get it sorted. He grabbed his keys. He needed to leave. He needed to get away from her accusing eyes. Where are you going? Emily screamed. It is getting dark. My parents are going to call back any minute. What am I supposed to tell them? That we are sitting in the dark like peasants because my husband is a fraud. I am going to get the money, Kendrick yelled back, slamming the front door behind him. He ran to his car. He did not know where he was going. He just knew he had to find $5,000 in a city where he had burned every bridge. Back inside the house, Emily stood alone in the foyer. The temperature was dropping rapidly. She pulled her cashmere sweater tighter around herself. She looked at her phone. 5% battery remaining. She realized with a jolt of horror that she could not even charge it. She walked to the window and looked out at the street. The neighbor houses were glowing with warm yellow light. They had heat. They had power. They had Thanksgiving turkeys thawing in working refrigerators. For the first time, Emily felt a crack in her delusion. She looked around the shadows of the living room. Without the lights, without the warmth, the house did not feel like a palace anymore. It felt like a tomb. And she was trapped inside it with a man who could not even keep the lights on. She sat down on the expensive sofa, and for the first time since she married into the Freeman family, she was not thinking about how to spend our money. She was wondering how she was going to survive the night. The temperature inside the Buckhead mansion had dropped to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and desperation does strange things to a man's ego. Kendrick was shivering in his designer jacket, pacing the dark hallway, while Emily screamed upstairs about her hairdryer not working. They needed $5,000 to turn the lights back on, and they needed it within the hour. Kendrick's eyes fell on the one asset in the house that wasn't bolted down or connected to the grid. In the garage, under a custom dust cover, sat my father, pride and joy. A vintage 1980 Mercedes SL convertible. It was pristine cherry red with tan leather seats. Otis had driven it maybe 3 times in the last decade, treating it more like a museum exhibit than a vehicle. Kendrick grabbed the spare keys from the hook in the mudroom. He convinced himself this wasn't theft. It was a loan. He would sell the car, pay the power bill, impress the Sterlings, and then buy the car back with the investment money he was sure to get from his father-in-law. In his delusional mind, it was a brilliant business maneuver. He backed the car out of the garage, the engine roaring to life and echoing through the quiet neighborhood. He didn't drive to a pawn shop or a scrapyard. No, Kendrick had too much pride for that. He drove straight to the luxury dealership on Piedmont Road, the same one where he had been rejected for the Porsche lease just days earlier. He figured they would jump at the chance to buy a classic. I was in a meeting with my marketing team when my phone buzzed. It was an automated alert from my asset tracking software. Vehicle movement detected. 1980 Mercedes SL. I frowned, checking the GPS. The car was moving fast away from the house and toward the commercial district. I didn't call Kendrick. I called the dealership. I knew the owner personally, and I knew exactly where that car was heading. Kendrick rolled into the dealership lot with the top down, despite the freezing weather, trying to look like a playboy bored with his toy. He walked into the showroom, scanning for a salesman. "I want to sell it today," he announced loudly, tossing the keys on the desk of the first manager he saw. "Cash offer only. I am in a rush." The manager, a man named Steve, picked up the keys. He recognized Kendrick from the credit disaster earlier in the week, but he remained professional. He walked out to inspect the car. It was flawless. "We can certainly make an offer," Steve said, walking back inside. "Let me just run the VIN number and check the title status." "It will only take a moment." Kendrick leaned against the desk, tapping his foot. "Hurry up. I have a dinner to plan." Steve typed the number into the database. His eyebrows shot up. He typed it again. Then he looked at Kendrick with a strange expression. "Mr. Freeman, are you the legal owner of this vehicle?" Kendrick rolled his eyes. "It is my father's car, but he gave it to me. I have full authority to sell it. Just cut the check." Steve turned the monitor screen away. "Actually, the system shows this vehicle is registered to Freeman Holdings, LLC. And there is a flag on the account." "A flag?" Kendrick asked, his heart skipping a beat. "What kind of flag?" "Stolen or misappropriated asset," Steve said, his voice dropping an octave. "The owner contacted us 3 minutes ago. She said the vehicle was taken without authorization." "She," Kendrick whispered. The blood drained from his face. Steve pressed a button under the desk. "I have to ask you to wait here, Mr. Freeman. Security is on the way." "I am leaving," Kendrick stammered, reaching for the keys. Steve covered the keys with his hand. "I cannot let you take the vehicle, sir. The police have already been notified." 10 minutes later, I pulled up to the precinct, not the dealership. The police had been efficient. They had arrested Kendrick for attempted grand theft auto and possession of stolen property. When I walked into the station, the fluorescent lights hummed loudly overhead. The air smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. I was wearing a cream-colored wool coat and heels that clicked sharply on the linoleum floor. The desk sergeant looked up. "I am here for Kendrick Freeman," I said calmly. "I am the owner of the vehicle." They led me to an interrogation room. Kendrick was sitting at a metal table. His expensive jacket crumpled, his hands cuffed to the chair. When he saw me, he didn't look angry anymore. He looked terrified. "Simone, get me out of here," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "This is a misunderstanding. I was just borrowing it. You cannot let them charge me with a felony. The Sterlings are coming tomorrow. If I am in jail..." If you are in jail, the dinner is cancelled. I finished for him, and Emily finds out her husband is not a tycoon, but a thief who steals from his own father. Please, Simone, I will do anything. Just drop the charges, tell them it was a mistake. I sat down opposite him and placed a single sheet of paper on the table. It wasn't a withdrawal of charges. It was a document I had drafted in the car. I am not going to send you to prison, Kendrick, I said softly. Not because I care about you, but because I do not want the Freeman name dragged through the mud in the court system. However, freedom has a price. I slid the paper toward him. It was a promissory note, a legal document acknowledging a debt. What is this? Kendrick asked, squinting at the text. It is an admission of debt, I explained. You owe me $50,000. $5,000 for the power bill you need to pay, $40,000 for the car depreciation and emotional distress, and $5,000 for my legal fees today. $50,000, Kendrick gasped. I do not have that kind of money. Then enjoy your stay in the county jail, I said, standing up and reaching for my purse. Grand theft is a serious charge. I am sure Emily parents will understand why you missed Thanksgiving. Wait! Kendrick screamed. He struggled against the cuffs. Wait! I will sign it. I sat back down and uncapped a heavy fountain pen. You sign this, and you acknowledge that if you miss a single payment of $500 a month, starting in January, I can garnish your wages, seize your future assets, and file a lawsuit that will bankrupt you publicly. Do we understand each other? Yes, Kendrick whispered. Yes, just give me the pen. The officer unlocked one of his hands. Kendrick signed the document, his hand shaking so badly the signature looked like a seismograph of an earthquake. I took the paper, blew on the ink to dry it, and placed it carefully in my bag. Officer, I called out, opening the door. The detective stuck his head in. There has been a misunderstanding, I said, flashing a charming smile. My brother had permission to use the car. He just forgot the paperwork. I am declining to press charges. The detective looked at me, then at Kendrick, sweating profusely in the chair. He knew exactly what had happened. He knew I had just bought my brother's soul for $50,000. You are free to go. Mr. Freeman? The detective grunted, unlocking the other cuff. Kendrick rubbed his wrists. He didn't say thank you. He didn't look at me. He just grabbed his jacket and ran out of the room like a rat escaping a trap. I walked out slowly to the parking lot. Kendrick was already in an Uber speeding back to the dark freezing house. He had avoided jail, but he had walked right into a prison of his own making. He now legally owed me a fortune, and he still had to figure out how to explain to Emily why he came home without the $5,000 for the lights. I got into my car and checked the time. The sun was setting. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. The stage was set. The players were in position, and I had front row tickets to the main event. Kendrick thought he had survived the worst of it. He had no idea that the real bill was coming due at dinner. Thanksgiving morning in Buckhead is usually a symphony of peace. It is the sound of leaves rustling in the wind, the distant hum of luxury SUVs pulling into driveways, and the smell of roasting turkeys wafting from gourmet kitchens. But at 450 Blackland Road, the morning soundtrack was a violent mechanical roar. The industrial generator Kendrick had rented from a construction site was chugging away in the backyard, vibrating the windows and filling the crisp autumn air with the smell of diesel fumes. It was a desperate band-aid on a bullet wound. Inside the house, Emily was frantic. She was running around lighting expensive scented candles, not to set a mood, but to hide the fact that the corners of the living room were dark. The generator was only powerful enough to keep the refrigerator running and a few key circuits in the kitchen alive. The heating system was still dead. The house was holding a steady chill of 55 degrees. Emily had forced my mother Joyce to wear a thick wool sweater under her silk blouse, and they had positioned the dining table in the sunroom, hoping the greenhouse effect would keep their guests from seeing their breath. At 11 o'clock sharp, a silver Bentley Mulsanne rolled up the driveway. It moved with the silent grace of a predator. This was the arrival of Arthur and Martha Sterling. They were old money from Connecticut, the kind of people who thought Atlanta was a charming but backward provincial town. Arthur Sterling stepped out of the car, adjusting his cashmere scarf. He looked at the house, then he looked at the generator vibrating behind the hydrangeas. He frowned. Kendrick rushed out the front door wearing a suit that I had bought him for a job interview he never went to. He plastered a wide fake smile on his face. "Arthur, Martha, welcome," he shouted over the noise of the generator. "So glad you made it down safely. Sorry about the noise out back. The city decided to do emergency maintenance on the main power grid today of all days. Can you believe the incompetence?" Arthur Sterling shook Kendrick's hand with a limp grip. He looked at the house with a critical eye. "City maintenance on a holiday. How peculiar. I did not notice any work crews on the drive-in." The streetlights seemed fine. Kendrick laughed a nervous high-pitched sound. "Oh, you know how it is. It is probably just this block. Buckhead infrastructure is getting overwhelmed with all the new money moving in." Martha Sterling stepped out wrapped in a fur coat that probably cost more than Kendrick owed me. She looked at Emily, who was standing in the doorway shivering slightly. "Hello, Mother," Emily chirped, hugging the older woman. "You look ravishing." "You look cold, darling," Martha said, pulling back. "Is the heat out too?" "Just a temporary glitch," Emily lied, linking arms with her mother. "Come inside. We have plenty of wine to keep us warm. And the food is going to be spectacular." They ushered the Sterlings into the foyer. The house was dim, but the sunroom was bright enough to pass for intentional ambiance. As they walked through the hallway, Arthur Sterling stopped to admire the architecture. He tapped the wainscoting with his cane. "I must say," Kendrick Arthur said, his voice echoing in the quiet hallway. "When Emily told us you had bought this place, I was skeptical. It is a significant piece of property, very ambitious for a young man of your background." Kendrick puffed out his chest. "Well, Arthur, I believe in aiming high. I saw the potential in this market 5 years ago. I leveraged my initial capital into a diversified portfolio. This house is just the crown jewel. I call it the headquarters of Freeman Global." I watched this interaction through the hidden camera I had installed in the bookshelf years ago to keep an eye on the cleaning staff. The audacity was breathtaking. Kendrick was claiming my blood, sweat, and tears as his own. He was using terms he had heard me use on business calls, parroting them back without understanding what they meant. Arthur nodded, looking around with a gaze that felt more like an appraisal than admiration. "It is certainly impressive. You know, it is rare to see people from your community achieving this level of ownership in this specific zip code. Most just rent or overextend themselves. But you seem to have a solid footing." It was a backhanded compliment, a microaggression wrapped in a silk handkerchief. He was saying he was surprised a black man could afford his daughter lifestyle. Kendrick either didn't catch the insult or he was too desperate to care. "Absolutely," Kendrick agreed, eager to please. "I built this from the ground up. No handouts, just hard work and smart investments. That is the Freeman way." Joyce was standing in the kitchen, frantically basting the turkey, which was cooking slower than usual because of the power fluctuations. She heard Kendrick lie, and she didn't say a word. She just kept her head down, complicit in the charade. She knew the truth. She knew that every brick in this house was paid for by the daughter she had disowned. But she needed the Sterlings to approve of her son, so she swallowed the lie along with her pride. "Dinner is served," Emily announced, clapping her hands. They moved to the sunroom. The table was set beautifully with the china I had bought for my parents' 30th anniversary. The crystal glasses sparkled in the sunlight, but there was an underlying tension that no amount of table setting could hide. The generator chugged on in the background, a rhythmic reminder that everything here was on the verge of collapse. Arthur sat at the head of the table, a spot usually reserved for my father, Otis. Otis sat to his right, looking small and defeated. He had been unusually quiet all morning, terrified that the police might return. "So Kendrick," Arthur said, unfolding his napkin. "Tell me more about this venture you wanted to discuss. Emily says you are looking for a seed round of $2 million. If your real estate holdings are as robust as this house suggests, why do you need outside capital? Kendrick cleared his throat. He had practiced this speech in the mirror. He leaned forward, putting on his serious businessman face. Liquidity, Arthur. It is all about liquidity. My assets are tied up in long-term holds like this estate and the commercial strip downtown. I do not want to disturb the principal investments. This new tech venture is separate. It is going to revolutionize the logistics industry in Georgia. He was talking about a trucking company idea he had scribbled on a napkin 3 weeks ago. He had no business plan. He had no trucks. He just had a need for cash to pay off his gambling debts and now to pay me back. Arthur took a sip of the wine I had paid for. Interesting, Arthur said, swirling the red liquid in the glass. I value self-made men who do not rely on others to foot the bill. If this house is truly yours free and clear, that demonstrates the kind of discipline I look for in a partner. It is 100% mine. Kendrick lied without blinking. Paid in cash, no mortgage. I do not believe in debt. Emily squeezed Kendrick's hand, beaming at her parents. See, Dad? I told you he was a provider. He takes such good care of us. Martha smiled thinly. Well, it is certainly better than that apartment you lived in when you first met him. I was worried you would end up struggling, Emily. But this is acceptable. The air in the room was thick with lies. They were toasting to a success that did not exist. They were eating food cooked on a stove powered by a rented generator. They were sitting in a house that belonged to the woman they had banned from the table. Kendrick raised his glass. To family. And to new partnerships. To family, Arthur echoed. They clinked glasses. The sound was sharp and clear. And that was the exact moment the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite chime. It was a long, persistent press. Kendrick froze. His glass hovered halfway to his mouth. Who could that be? He muttered. We are not expecting anyone. Maybe it is the city power crew, Emily suggested, her voice trembling. Maybe they fixed the lights. I will get it, Kendrick said, standing up too quickly, knocking his chair back. He looked nervous. He knew the police had warned him to stay out of trouble. He knew he was walking on a razor edge. He walked to the foyer, wiping his sweaty palms on his pants. He approached the heavy oak door. He looked through the peephole, expecting a utility worker or maybe a neighbor complaining about the noise. But when he opened the door, he didn't see a repairman. He saw a group of strangers. A couple in their 30s holding a folder and a woman wearing a blazer with a real estate agency logo. Hi, can we help you? Kendrick asked, blocking the doorway. The real estate agent smiled brightly. Hi there. I know it is a holiday and I apologize for the intrusion, but the listing said open house by appointment only, and the instructions said the key box was removed, so we should just knock. These are the Davises. They are very interested in the property. Kendrick stared at her. Listing. What listing? This house isn't for sale. The agent checked her phone. 450 Blackland Road. Listed yesterday on Zillow as an emergency sale by owner. Price is set for immediate liquidation. Are you the tenant? The tenant. The word hung in the air like a curse. Behind him in the dining room, the conversation had stopped. Arthur Sterling had ears like a bat. Who is at the door? Kendrick, Arthur called out. Kendrick's face went pale. He tried to slam the door, but the agent held it open with her foot. Sir, we have an appointment confirmed by the owner, Ms. Simone Freeman. She said we could tour the property at noon. And just like that, the generator outside seemed to get louder, roaring in Kendrick's ears, drowning out his heartbeat. The lie was not just unraveling, it was being set on fire. And I was just pulling into the driveway to pour the gasoline. The crystal glasses chimed together in the sunroom, a delicate sound that seemed to hang in the freezing air. Arthur Sterling had just finished his toast, praising the virtues of Black entrepreneurship and the legacy Kendrick was supposedly building. Kendrick was beaming. His face was flushed with the intoxicating mix of red wine and successful deception. He actually believed his own lie in that moment. He looked at Emily with pride, and she looked back with relief, thinking the worst was over. My mother Joyce took a nervous sip of her drink, her eyes darting around the room as if she expected the walls to speak the truth. Then the doorbell rang. It was not the polite chime of a guest arriving late. It was the insistent buzzing of someone who had a schedule to keep. The sound sliced through the dinner conversation like a knife. Kendrick lowered his glass. His hand jerked, spilling a few drops of expensive Cabernet onto the white tablecloth. The stain bloomed like a fresh wound. "Who is that?" Emily asked, her voice tight. "We are not expecting anyone else, are we?" "Maybe it is the city crew finally here to fix the power," Kendrick said, standing up. He forced a laugh, but it sounded like a bark. "I will handle it. Arthur, please enjoy the appetizers. Do not let a little interruption spoil the mood." Kendrick walked out of the sunroom and into the main foyer. I watched him through the security feed. He wiped his sweaty palms on his trousers. He checked his reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting his tie, trying to summon the arrogance that usually protected him. He marched to the heavy oak front door, prepared to yell at a utility worker or maybe a confused delivery driver. He swung the door open with aggressive force. "Can I help you?" he demanded, blocking the entrance with his body. Standing on the porch was not a repair crew. It was a woman with a bright professional smile, plastered on her face, holding a stack of flyers. Behind her stood a couple in their 30s looking eager and holding Starbucks cups. They looked past Kendrick, peering into the dim hallway with blatant curiosity. "Hi there," the woman chirped, stepping forward. "I am Brenda from Buckhead Realty. We are here for the open house." Kendrick blinked. The cold air rushed past him, chilling the sweat on his neck. "Open house," he repeated dumbly. "What are you talking about? This is a private residence. We are having Thanksgiving dinner. You have the wrong address." Brenda checked the iPad in her hand. She did not look intimidated. She looked annoyed. 450 Blackland Road, she read aloud. "Listed yesterday for emergency liquidation." The instructions on the broker portal were very specific. Lockbox removed, door unlocked, walk-ins welcome from noon to 2. She tried to step around him, but Kendrick moved to block her. "Lady, are you crazy? I did not list this house. I own this house. Now get off my porch before I call the police." The couple behind Brenda exchanged a look. The husband whispered something to the wife. Brenda stopped smiling. She tapped her screen and turned the iPad toward Kendrick. "Sir, I do not know who you are, but this property is definitely listed. And at this price point, we are not going to waste time arguing. It is priced at $1.2 million for a quick cash close. That is $300,000 under market value. My clients are very interested, so if you could just step aside." $1.2 million. The number echoed in the hallway. Kendrick stared at the screen. There was a photo of the house. A photo taken 5 years ago when I bought it. And right there under the listing agent name was the seller name. Simone Freeman. "No," Kendrick whispered. "No, she cannot do this. She cannot sell it while we are living here." Brenda pushed past him. Her heels clicked loudly on the marble floor of the foyer. The potential buyers followed her, tracking dirt onto the rug Emily had spent weeks keeping pristine. "Wow," the wife said, looking up at the high ceilings. "It is dark in here, though. Is the power out? The listing said utilities might be disconnected due to vacancy." Brenda explained, her voice carrying clearly through the silent house. "It is an as-is sale. The owner wants it off the books by Monday." Kendrick spun around, chasing after them. "You cannot be in here. Get out! Get out right now!" The commotion had traveled to the sunroom. The clinking of silverware stopped. Arthur Sterling frowned, setting down his fork. "What on earth is going on out there?" Arthur grumbled. Emily stood up. "I will go check. It is probably just the neighbors complaining about the generator." But before she could leave the room, Brenda and the buyers walked right past the arched doorway of the sunroom. They stopped when they saw the dinner party. "Oh, excuse us," Brenda said, not looking apologetic at all. "The listing said the property was vacant. I didn't realize there were squatters still on the premises." Squatters. The word hung in the air heavier than the smell of the turkey. Arthur Sterling stood up slowly. He was a large man, and when he stood, he commanded the room. He walked over to the doorway, his face like thunder. "Who are you, and why are you walking through my son-in-law estate?" he demanded. Brenda looked at Arthur. She recognized the look of a man who thought he was in charge, but she had a signed listing agreement and a potential commission on the line. "I am a real estate agent, sir," she said, holding up the flyer. "And we are touring this home, which is currently for sale by the owner, Ms. Simone Freeman." Kendrick rushed in behind her, breathless and panic-stricken. "Arthur, do not listen to her. It is a mistake. A clerical error. Simone is just playing a prank." Arthur snatched the flyer from Brenda's hand. He put on his reading glasses. He read the bold print at the top. "Emergency sale, foreclosure pending, cash offers only." He read the seller name, Simone Freeman. He looked at the price. He looked up at Kendrick. "You told me you owned this house," Arthur said. His voice was dangerously quiet. "You told me you paid cash. You told me it was the headquarters of Freeman Global." "It is," Kendrick stammered. "It is mine. Simone just held the title for tax purposes." "It is a complicated structure, Arthur. You know how these things work." "I know exactly how real estate works, boy," Arthur roared, throwing the flyer onto the floor. "And I know that if your sister is listing it for sale, she is the owner. And if she is listing it as vacant while you are sitting here eating turkey, it means you are not just a liar, you are a trespasser." Emily ran to her father, grabbing his arm. "Daddy, please calm down. Kendrick can explain. Simone is crazy. She is vindictive. She is doing this to hurt us." Arthur shook her off. He turned to Brenda. "Is there an offer on the table yet?" Brenda blinked, surprised by the question. Not yet, sir. We just walked in. But at this price, it will go today." Arthur laughed a harsh, bitter sound. "I bet it will." He turned to look at the potential buyers who were now watching the family drama with wide eyes. "You folks might want to check the basement," Arthur said to them. "I believe the foundation is cracked, just like the moral character of the people living here." "Dad," Emily cried, "stop it." Kendrick tried to grab Arthur's shoulder. "Arthur, please let us go to the study and talk man to man. I can show you the paperwork." "Do not touch me," Arthur snapped, backing away as if Kendrick was contagious. "You wanted $2 million from me. You wanted me to invest in your logistics company, and you cannot even keep the lights on in a house you do not own." The generator outside sputtered and died. The fuel had run out. The last bit of light in the hallway faded, plunging the foyer into gray shadows. "Perfect," Arthur said, adjusting his coat. "Absolutely perfect." Brenda cleared her throat. "If this is a bad time, we can come back in an hour. But my clients really need to measure the master bedroom." "Get out!" Kendrick screamed at her, losing all control. "Everyone, get out!" Arthur turned to his wife, Martha. "Get your coat, Martha. We are leaving." "But Daddy, we have not even had the turkey!" Emily wailed, tears streaming down her face. "I have lost my appetite," Arthur said, walking toward the door. "And I suspect you will be losing your home very shortly. I suggest you start packing instead of eating." The buyers looked at each other and shrugged. They walked past Kendrick, ignoring his rage, and started following Brenda up the stairs to inspect the second floor. They viewed Kendrick not as the owner, but as a nuisance obstacle in their path to a bargain. Kendrick stood in the hallway, trapped between his furious father-in-law walking out the front door and a group of strangers walking up his stairs to measure his bedroom. He looked at Emily, who was sobbing into her napkin. He looked at his mother, Joyce, who was staring at her plate, refusing to look up. And somewhere in the city, high above the chaos, I watched the feed on my phone and took a sip of tea. The house was officially on the market, but the real show was just getting started. I checked the time. My lawyer was scheduled to arrive in exactly 10 minutes with the eviction notice. The appetizers were done. It was time for the main course. The sound of air brakes hissing outside the front door was the only thing loud enough to break the suffocating tension in the dining room. It was a heavy, industrial sound followed by the beep of a large vehicle reversing. Through the bay windows, which were currently framing a gloomy twilight, the guests watched as a massive white box truck with the words, Atlanta Premier Relocation Services, emblazoned on the side, backed right up to the front porch, blocking the view of the manicured lawn. Behind the truck, a matte black Range Rover pulled up and parked with precision. The driver door opened and I stepped out. I was not wearing the humble attire my family preferred to see me in. I was wearing a white bespoke suit tailored to within an inch of its life, paired with 6-inch stilettos that were sharp enough to be considered weapons. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and my face was set in a mask of absolute calm. I walked up the front steps, my attorney David flanking me like a silent bodyguard. The front door was still open from where Kendrick had failed to chase away the real estate agent. I walked into the foyer, and the sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor echoed like gunshots in a canyon. The scene before me was pathetic. The house was dark, save for the few candles Emily had lit, which now cast long dancing shadows that made everyone look skeletal. The air smelled of cold turkey and diesel fumes. Emily was the first to react. She jumped up from the table, knocking her chair over. Her face was a mask of panic and smeared mascara. "What are you doing here?" she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You have some nerves showing up after you cut the power. Get that truck out of my driveway. My parents are here." I did not stop walking. I did not raise my voice. I barely even glanced at her. I walked straight past her into the sunroom where the rest of the party was frozen in various states of shock. "I know they are here," I said, my voice smooth and carrying effortlessly through the room. I waited until everyone was assembled. It saves me the trouble of repeating myself. I stopped at the head of the table, standing directly behind the empty chair where Kendrick had been sitting before he ran to the door. I looked at Arthur and Martha Sterling. They were huddled in their coats, looking miserable and confused. "Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. I apologize for the temperature. I am Simone Freeman. I am the owner of this house, and I am afraid you have been invited to a dinner party that does not exist." Kendrick rushed back into the room. He looked wild. His tie was crooked and sweat was beading on his forehead despite the cold. "Do not listen to her," he shouted, waving his hands desperately. "She is crazy, Arthur. She is just bitter because she was not invited. She is trying to ruin my reputation." He tried to grab my arm to pull me away from the table. My attorney David stepped forward, blocking him with a subtle but firm shift of his body. "Touch her, and you will spend tonight in a cell," David said quietly. "And this time there will be no bail money." Kendrick froze. The mention of bail money made his eyes dart to Arthur Sterling, who was watching the scene with the cold calculation of a man who was beginning to see the cracks in the facade. Arthur stood up slowly. He looked at Kendrick, then he looked at me. He saw the suit. He saw the lawyer. He saw the confidence that cannot be faked. "You say you are the owner?" Arthur asked, his voice gruff. "Kendrick told me he bought this estate 5 years ago with cash. He told me he holds the deed free and clear." I reached out and took a thick leather-bound folder from David. I placed it on the table right next to the untouched centerpiece. The sound of the heavy folder hitting the wood was final. "He told you a lot of things," I said, opening the folder. "He told you he was a partner in Freeman Holdings. He told you he was a diversified investor. But the truth is much less glamorous." I slid a document across the table toward Arthur. "This is the deed to the property," I explained. "Dated 5 years ago. Sole owner Simone Freeman. Kendrick is listed nowhere. Not even as a tenant." Arthur picked up the paper. He adjusted his glasses. He read the legal text. His face hardened. "But that is just the beginning." I continued, pulling out another stack of papers. "These are the bank statements from the family trust I set up. You see, Mr. Sterling, I gave my parents and brother access to an account that was supposed to be for maintenance and living expenses. I thought I was helping them live comfortably. Instead, Kendrick used it as his personal casino." Emily gasped. "That is a lie. He invests that money. He trades crypto." I looked at Emily with pity. Honey, the only thing he trades is poker chips at the Hard Rock Casino. I pointed to the highlighted lines on the bank statements. Here are the withdrawals, I said. $20,000 at the MGM Grand, $15,000 at a sports betting kiosk, $10,000 just last week, sent to a bookie in Las Vegas. That's seed money he wanted from you today. It wasn't for a logistics company. It was to pay off a loan shark before they broke his legs. Arthur Sterling flipped through the pages. His hands were shaking. He saw the dates. He saw the amounts. He saw the undeniable truth printed in black and white. He looked up at Kendrick. The look in his eyes was not anger. It was disgust. Pure, unadulterated revulsion. "You are a gambler," Arthur whispered. "A degenerate gambler. And you wanted $2 million of my money." Kendrick fell to his knees. "It is not like that, Arthur. I have a system. I was going to win it back. I just needed a little capital to turn the tide. Simone is twisting the numbers." Arthur closed the folder. He didn't slam it. He just closed it gently, as if closing the coffin on his respect for his son-in-law. "You lied to me about the house. You lied to me about the business. You brought my wife into a freezing house with stolen electricity. And you tried to con me on Thanksgiving." Arthur turned to me. "Ms. Freeman, I apologize for trespassing. We were led to believe this was our daughter home." "It is not her home," I said coldly. "And as of 10 minutes ago, it is not even my home anymore." I turned toward the front door where 4 large men in moving uniforms were walking in, carrying packing crates. "What is happening?" Emily screamed, clutching her mother's arm. "Who are those men?" "Since the unauthorized tenants have violated the terms of their occupancy, and since the property is under contract for an emergency sale, I have hired a team to assist in the immediate vacating of the premises," I announced. I looked at my watch. "The new owner takes possession on Monday. The house must be empty. Since you all seem to have trouble managing your affairs, I thought I would speed up the process. The movers will pack your personal items into the truck. Anything left behind in 2 hours will be considered trash." My mother. Joyce finally spoke. Her voice was small and trembling. "Simone, you cannot do this. Where will we go? It is Thanksgiving." I looked at the woman who had watched me being humiliated for years and said nothing. I looked at the father who had uninvited me from this very table. "I suggest you go to a hotel, Mom," I said. "But do not use the credit card. I canceled that too." I turned back to the movers. "Start with the dining room," I commanded. "Pack the china. It belongs to me." As the movers began to wrap the plates right off the table while the family sat there in stunned silence, I saw the last shred of Kendrick dignity evaporate. He was not a mogul. He was not a victim. He was just a man watching his life get packed into a cardboard box. And the Sterlings were watching every second of it. The dining room was becoming a hollow shell of its former glory. The movers were efficient, moving around the frozen dinner guests like sharks swimming through a reef. They wrapped the crystal goblets in brown paper and placed them into boxes with a rhythmic thud that sounded like a gavel coming down in a courtroom. But the loudest sound in the room was the heavy breathing of Arthur Sterling. Arthur stood at the head of the table, holding the deed I had thrown down. His face was a map of disbelief, slowly transforming into a landscape of pure rage. He looked from the legal document to his son-in-law Kendrick, who was currently wiping sweat from his forehead with a napkin that no longer belonged to him. Arthur spoke, and his voice was low and dangerous, vibrating with the authority of a man who had destroyed companies for sport. "Kendrick, look at me." Kendrick looked up, his eyes wide and terrified. "Yes, Arthur. In the proposal you sent to my legal team last week regarding the logistics merger, you listed assets. Specifically, you listed a personal capital injection of $500,000 currently sitting in the corporate account of Freeman Global. And more importantly, you listed this property at 450 Blackland Road as the primary collateral to secure my $2 million investment." Kendrick swallowed hard. The sound was audible in the silent room. "Well, yes, Arthur, that was the structure we discussed. Collateral is standard for a seed round. Arthur held up the deed. The paper shook slightly in his hand. But you do not own the collateral, Kendrick. This document proves that you are not even a minority shareholder in this property. You are a squatter, which means you committed fraud. You attempted to secure a multi-million-dollar loan using an asset that belongs to your sister. It was a misunderstanding. Kendrick squeaked, his voice cracking. I meant to transfer the title. Simone and I had a verbal agreement. She was going to sign it over next week as a gift. I laughed. It was a sharp, cold sound that cut through his lie instantly. I stepped forward, crossing my arms over my white suit. Mr. Sterling. I hate to interrupt this fascinating work of fiction, but I think you should check the corporate status of Freeman Global before you waste any more breath. Kendrick turned to me, his eyes begging for silence, but I was done protecting him. Simone, don't, he whispered. I ignored him and locked eyes with Arthur. My brother likes to play CEO, Mr. Sterling, but a CEO needs capital. The $500,000 he showed you in his business account was not revenue. It was not profit from savvy trading. It was a revocable grant I deposited 6 months ago to help him start a legitimate business. I gave him a chance to build something real. I paused, letting the words sink in. However, the terms of that grant were very specific. It was for business operations only, not for gambling, not for leasing luxury cars, and certainly not for funding a lifestyle he could not afford. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen, showing Arthur a banking notification. At 9 o'clock this morning, right before I finalized the sale of this house, I exercised the clawback clause in our contract. I withdrew the entire $500,000, plus interest. The corporate account for Freeman Global is currently overdrawn by $300. Kendrick's knees finally gave out. He slumped into his chair, which groaned under the weight of his failure. Arthur looked at his phone. He opened his banking app, or perhaps he was emailing his own lawyers. He tapped the screen a few times, and then his face went pale. It is empty, he whispered. The account is empty. He looked at Kendrick with a mixture of pity and revulsion. You are broke. You have no house. You have no capital. You have no company. You are nothing but a shell game in a cheap suit. Arthur reached into the inside pocket of his cashmere blazer. He pulled out a long rectangular piece of paper. It was a check. A cashier check made out to Freeman Global for $2 million. Kendrick saw the check. His eyes bulged. It was his lifeline. It was the magic ticket that was supposed to fix everything. If he could just get his hands on that check, he could pay me back. He could buy a new house. He could keep the lie alive for just a few more months. Arthur. Please, Kendrick begged, reaching out a trembling hand. We can fix this. I can explain. The money is just moving between accounts. Do not listen to her. We are family. Family. Arthur spat the word out like it tasted like poison. You tried to steal from me. You tried to expose my family to financial liability. You brought my wife and daughter into a house with no heat and fed us lies. Arthur held the check up with both hands. The paper was crisp and blue. This was your future, Kendrick. This was the trust I placed in you. With a slow, deliberate motion, Arthur tore the check in half. The sound of the ripping paper was louder than the generator outside. It was the sound of a dream dying. He put the two halves together and tore them again, and again, until the $2 million was nothing but blue confetti raining down onto the turkey carcass. No, Kendrick wailed. He actually fell to the floor, scrambling to pick up the pieces, as if he could tape them back together and cash them at the bank. No, Arthur, please, I need that. While Kendrick was crawling on the floor, humiliated, another sound filled the room. It was a high-pitched, keening wail that started low and rose to a shriek. It was Emily. She was standing by the window, watching her husband grovel on the floor. Her face was twisted into a mask of horror. But she wasn't looking at Kendrick with concern. She was looking at him with hatred. You lied to me, she screamed. She threw her wine glass at him. It shattered against the wall, spraying red wine over the wallpaper. You told me we were rich. You told me I could quit my job at the gallery because the company was taking off. You told me we were going to buy the vacation home in Aspen next month. Kendrick looked up from the floor, clutching the torn paper scraps. Emily, baby, listen. Don't you call me baby. Emily shrieked. Her carefully curated persona of the wealthy housewife was cracking, falling away to reveal a terrified, angry woman. I married a success, she yelled, her voice hysterical. I did not marry a fraud who lives on his sister allowance. Do you know what you have done? You have humiliated me. How am I supposed to show my face at the club? How am I supposed to explain this to my friends? She turned to her father, grabbing his lapels. Daddy, tell him he is lying. Tell him you will write another check. We cannot be poor, Daddy. I cannot go back to living in an apartment. Arthur gently peeled his daughter's hands off his coat. His face was sad but firm. Emily, get your coat. We are leaving. No, Emily cried, stamping her foot like a child. Make him fix it. Make Simone give the money back. She turned to me, her eyes wild. You did this. You jealous witch. You planned this. You waited until today to ruin everything. Give him the money back. It is our money. I looked at her coolly. It was never your money, Emily. It was my charity. And charity has limits. You spent 5 years treating me like an intruder in the house I paid for. You spent 5 years mocking my clothes and my job while spending my earnings on your vanity. Today, the scholarship is officially revoked. I signaled to the movers who were waiting awkwardly by the door. Please continue, I said. Clear the table. One of the movers reached for the silver platter under the turkey. Kendrick was still on the floor, but he had to scramble out of the way as the mover stepped over him to do his job. Arthur Sterling put his arm around his wife Martha, who looked like she was about to faint. Come along, Martha, he said, steering her toward the door. We are going to the Ritz-Carlton. We will salvage this holiday away from this circus. Emily looked at her parents walking away. She looked at Kendrick sobbing on the floor, holding torn paper. She looked at the movers packing up her life. Wait for me, she screamed, running after her parents. Daddy, wait. I am coming with you. I am not staying here with him. Kendrick looked up, his face wet with tears and snot. Emily, you cannot leave me. We are married. Emily stopped at the door. She looked back at him with cold, dead eyes. I married a millionaire, Kendrick, not a squatter. She slammed the door behind her, leaving him alone on the floor. The room was quiet except for the rustle of packing paper. I walked over to the table and picked up my glass of wine which I had set down earlier. I took a slow, deliberate sip. It was the best wine I had ever tasted. Kendrick, I said, looking down at him. You have about 90 minutes before the truck leaves. I suggest you start packing your clothes. The movers charge extra for loose items. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving him in the ruins of his own making. The payoff was complete. But the cleanup was just beginning. And for the first time in years, I didn't have to lift a finger to do it. Here is the detailed script for Part 12, The Mystery Buyer. The dining room was rapidly becoming a warehouse of cardboard boxes. The movers were stripping the walls of art and rolling up the rugs right from under our feet. The air was thick with the dust of upheaval. My brother Kendrick was still slumped in the corner, clutching the shredded remains of the $2 million check. But now it was my father turned to take center stage. Otis Freeman had spent 30 years in the pulpit, commanding respect with nothing but his voice and a Bible. He was used to being the ultimate authority. He watched the movers take his favorite armchair, and his face turned a dark, violent shade of purple. He marched over to me, ignoring the lawyer and the movers. He stood to his full height, trying to cast a shadow over me like he did when I was a child. Simone, stop this immediately, he boomed, using his preacher voice. I command you to stop this. You are dishonoring your mother and me. I looked at him calmly. I did not flinch. I was not 6 years old anymore, and his voice held no power over me. I am not dishonoring anyone, Otis, I said, using his first name, which made him recoil as if I had slapped him. I am simply closing a business transaction. You have lived here rent-free for 5 years. You have had ample time to save money. The fact that you are destitute is a failure of your stewardship, not mine. Otis stepped closer, invading my personal space. You cannot sell this house. It is the family home. Where will we go? Your mother is old. Do you want her sleeping on the street? Is that what your heart has become? Stone. My heart is fine, I replied, taking a step back to avoid his spittle. But my wallet is closed. As for where you will go, I believe there is a Motel 6 off the highway. I hear they leave the light on for you. Otis raised his hand as if to strike me, but my attorney David stepped in instantly. Mr. Freeman, I would advise against that. David said, his voice low and dangerous. Assaulting the property owner will only add prison time to your eviction record. Otis lowered his hand, shaking with impotent rage. You are a devil, Simone. You are doing this out of spite. You just want to see us suffer because we chose Kendrick over you. I smiled. It was a genuine smile because he had finally admitted it. Yes, I said softly. You chose him. You bet on the wrong horse, Otis. And now you are losing the farm. But do not worry. I did not sell the house to a stranger. I wanted to make sure the new owner was someone who would appreciate the location. I turned toward the front door, which was still open to the cold afternoon air. In fact, the buyer is waiting right outside. I told him he could take possession as soon as the ink was dry. A black Maybach pulled up behind the moving truck. It was sleek, aggressive, and far more expensive than Arthur's Sterling Bentley. The driver door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than Kendrick's entire life earnings. He walked up the steps with the swagger of a man who owned half the city. Arthur Sterling, who had been trying to comfort his crying daughter. Emily looked up. His eyes widened. His jaw actually dropped. No? Arthur whispered. No, it cannot be. The man walked into the foyer. He looked around the chaotic scene with amusement. He pulled a cigar from his pocket and smelled it, not bothering to light it. Hello, Arthur, the man said, his voice smooth as velvet. I see you are having a bit of a domestic crisis. Arthur's sterling face turned a sickly shade of gray. Standing in the hallway was Richard Vance. He was Arthur's fiercest competitor in the private equity world. They had been rivals for 20 years. Richard had stolen 3 major deals from Arthur in the last decade, and they hated each other with a passion that is only found in the high-stakes corporate world. Richard Arthur stammered. What are you doing here? I am inspecting my new acquisition, Richard said, gesturing to the walls. Simone gave me a call this morning. She offered me a deal I could not refuse. Prime Buckhead real estate for a fraction of the market value. And when she mentioned you were the one enjoying the property, well, I just had to sign the check immediately. Arthur turned to me, his eyes filled with betrayal. You sold the house to him. You sold my daughter home to Richard Vance. Do you know what this man has done to me? I shrugged. I know he pays cash, Arthur, and I know his check does not bounce. Richard walked past Arthur, ignoring him, to tap on the wall. Solid construction, Richard mused. A bit dated, though. The layout is terrible. And this wallpaper? Did a blind person choose this? Emily wailed from the corner. I chose that wallpaper. It is Italian silk. Richard glanced at her like she was a bug on his shoe. Well, it is hideous, my dear, but do not worry. It will not be here long. What do you mean? Arthur asked, his voice trembling. Richard smiled, showing perfectly capped teeth. I did not buy the house to live in it, Arthur. I already have an estate in Tuxedo Park. I bought this for the land. I have been looking for a place to build a regulation-sized tennis court and a guest house for my staff. He looked around the foyer again. I am going to bulldoze this place on Monday. Bulldoze it! Otis gasped, clutching his chest. This is a sanctuary. This is a house of God. It is a tear down, Richard corrected him. The excavator is already booked. I am going to flatten every brick. He turned back to Arthur Sterling. It is ironic, isn't it, Arthur? You spent all lunch bragging about your son-in-law estate, and now I am going to park my tractor on his living room. It really speaks to your judgment. If you cannot spot a fraud in your own family, How can investors trust you to spot a good deal in the market? Arthur looked like he was going to have a stroke. His reputation was his lifeblood, and now his biggest rival had leverage that would make him the laughingstock of the country club for years. Simone, Arthur hissed. You orchestrated this. You planned this entire scene. I checked my watch. I did. And I must say the execution was flawless. Richard Vance checked his diamond-encrusted Rolex. Well, as much as I enjoy watching you squirm, Arthur, I have architects coming in an hour. He looked at the movers and then at the Freeman family huddled together in their misery. You have 60 minutes to vacate my property. Anything left inside after that belongs to the demolition crew. And Arthur, please move your Bentley. It is blocking my view of the garden I am going to pave over. Richard turned his back on them and started discussing load-bearing walls with my lawyer. The room erupted into chaos. Real panic set in. Otis grabbed Joyce's arm. Joyce, get the photo albums. Get the Bible. Hurry. Emily was running in circles trying to grab her collection of designer shoes. Kendrick, where are the suitcases? Do not just sit there. Help me. Kendrick did not move. He was staring at the wall at the spot where he had hung a painting of himself. He looked catatonic. I stood by the door watching them scurry like ants whose hill had been kicked over. It was brutal, it was efficient, and it was absolutely necessary. They had spent years taking up space in my life, pushing me out to the margins. Now they were learning exactly what it felt like to be displaced. Arthur Sterling grabbed his wife and marched toward the door, refusing to look at me or Richard Vance. He stepped over a box of my childhood trophies that the movers had carelessly tossed on the floor. He didn't care about the Freemans anymore. He just wanted to escape the shame. 60 minutes. I called out to my parents. The clock is ticking. I walked out onto the porch and took a deep breath of the cold air. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn that would soon be a construction site. I pulled my phone out and blocked their numbers one by one. Otis, Joyce, Kendrick, Emily, delete, 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 delete. I was not just evicting them from the house, I was evicting them from my existence. And as I walked toward my Range Rover, leaving them to fight over scraps in a house that was destined for the landfill, I felt lighter than I had in years. The house was gone. The money was gone. The family was gone. But I was still standing, and I had never stood taller. The driveway of the estate was now a theater of absolute destruction, and the audience was comprised of movers, neighbors peering through blinds, and the man who had just bought the property to tear it down. My sister-in-law Emily was providing the soundtrack to this collapse. She was not crying anymore. Her tears had dried up and replaced by a cold, hard rage that looked terrifying on her perfectly made-up face. She stood by the open door of her father Bentley, her knuckles white as she gripped the handle. Kendrick was standing a few feet away, looking like a lost child reaching out to her. Emily, please, he begged, his voice cracking. We can fix this. I can talk to Arthur. I can get another loan. Do not leave me like this. Emily laughed. It was a sound devoid of humor, sharp as broken glass. Fix this, she screamed. You cannot fix this, Kendrick. You are a fraud. You have been lying to me since the day we met. You told me you owned the building. You told me you were a silent partner. You are nothing but a leech. She pulled the diamond ring off her finger. It was a ring I had paid for 3 years ago when Kendrick claimed he needed a loan for an engagement investment. She threw it at him. It bounced off his chest and landed in the gravel. I am filing for annulment first thing Monday morning, Emily hissed. On the grounds of fraud. You will never see me again. And do not think about coming after me for spousal support. You have nothing. Arthur Sterling stepped in between them. He did not look at Kendrick. He looked at his daughter. Get in the car, Emily. We are done here. Kendrick watched as the heavy door slammed shut. He watched as the Bentley reversed out of the driveway, tires crunching on the gravel, carrying away his wife, his status, and his last connection to the world of the wealthy. He stood there alone in the cold wind, wearing a suit he did not pay for, standing in front of a house he did not own. I turned away from him to face my parents. Otis and Joyce were huddled together on the front steps, sitting on their suitcases like refugees. They looked smaller than I had ever seen them. The arrogance was gone. The religious posturing was gone. All that was left was fear. Otis looked up at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Simone," he whispered, "please. We are your parents. You cannot just leave us here. We have nowhere to go." The movers took the beds. They took the chairs. Joyce reached out and grabbed the hem of my coat. Her hands were shaking. "We are family, Simone. I changed your diapers. I nursed you when you were sick. Does that mean nothing to you?" I looked down at them. For a second, I felt a flicker of the old guilt, the conditioning that had been installed in me since birth, the commandment to honor my father and mother. But then I remembered the phone call. I remembered the 105 missed calls, not to check if I was okay, but to demand money. I remembered being uninvited from Thanksgiving because I wasn't good enough for the Sterlings. "It means something, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "It means I spent 30 years trying to buy your love. It means I spent $2 million trying to make you comfortable. And in return, you treated me like a bank account with a heartbeat." I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I held it out to Otis. "This is the last thing I will ever give you," I said. Otis took it with trembling hands. He opened it. Inside were not checks. They were travel documents and a small stack of cash. "What is this?" Otis asked, looking confused. "Those are 2 one-way bus tickets to Birmingham, Alabama," I explained. "I still own that small 2-bedroom rental property near Grandma's old house. It is empty. I have paid the rent for 3 months. Inside the envelope is also $3,000 in cash. That is for food and utilities." "Birmingham," Joyce gasped. "But our friends are here. Our church is here. Your reputation here is gone," I said bluntly. "Once the truth gets out about Kendrick and the eviction, you will not want to show your faces at the church anyway. Birmingham is a fresh start. It is a chance to live within your means." "But 3 months?" Otis stammered. "What happens after 3 months?" "Then you figure it out," I said. "You are both able-bodied. You can work. You can live on your Social Security. For the first time in your lives, you are going to have to stand on your own 2 feet." Otis looked at the envelope, then he looked at the mansion behind him. The contrast was too much. He started to weep, not tears of repentance, but tears of self-pity. "You are cruel, Simone," he sobbed. "You are a cold, heartless woman. God will punish you for this." I buttoned my coat against the wind. "God has already punished me, Otis. He gave me this family, and now I am setting myself free." I signaled to the movers who were waiting by the truck. "Load their suitcases into the cab. You can drop them off at the bus station on your way to the depot." The movers nodded, lifting the heavy bags. Otis and Joyce stood up slowly. They looked at me one last time, waiting for me to crack. Waiting for me to say it was all a joke and invite them back into the warmth, but I just stood there, silent as a statue. They turned and walked toward the truck, their heads bowed, defeated by the daughter they had underestimated for decades. As the truck engine rumbled to life, Kendrick finally snapped out of his trance. He had watched his wife leave, he had watched his parents surrender, and now he turned his eyes toward me. The look on his face was not sadness. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. He had lost everything and he needed someone to blame. He needed to hurt the person who had taken away his fantasy. "You did this," he screamed. The sound was primal. "You ruined my life." He started running toward me. His hands were curled into fists. He wasn't running like a brother. He was running like an enemy combatant. I did not move. I did not flinch. I didn't have to. Standing near the black Range Rover were the 2 private security officers I had hired along with the off-duty police officer who had been monitoring the eviction. They had been waiting for this. Kendrick lunged at me, swinging his fist, wildly aiming for my face. Before he could get within 3 feet of me, he was intercepted. The security guard tackled him from the side, sending him crashing onto the paved driveway. Kendrick hit the ground hard, grunting in pain, but he kept fighting. He was thrashing and screaming obscenities, trying to crawl toward me. "Let me go!" he yelled. "I am going to kill her! She stole my house!" The police officer stepped forward. He pulled Kendrick's arms behind his back and clicked the handcuffs into place. The sound was metallic and final. Kendrick Freeman, the officer, said, his voice calm and authoritative. "You are under arrest for assault and for violating the restraining order Ms. Freeman filed 3 days ago." Restraining order. Kendrick gasped, his face pressed against the asphalt. "What restraining order?" "The one I filed after you showed up at my penthouse and threatened me," I said, looking down at him. "I knew you would not be able to control yourself, Kendrick. You never could." The officer hauled Kendrick to his feet. His expensive suit was torn at the shoulder. His face was scraped and bleeding. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. He wasn't going to a country club. He was going to a holding cell. And with a restraining order violation on his record, his chances of getting a bail bond were 0. "Take him away," I said, turning my back on him. I walked toward my car as the officer shoved Kendrick into the back of the patrol unit. I heard the door slam shut, muffling his screams. The driveway was suddenly quiet. The moving truck pulled away, carrying my parents to their new, humble life. The police car pulled away, carrying my brother to jail. Richard Vance, the new owner, was standing on the porch, smoking his cigar, watching the show with a satisfied smirk. He nodded at me, a silent acknowledgement of a business deal concluded. I walked over to my assistant Marcus, who was standing by my car holding my tablet. He looked at me, searching for signs of a breakdown. He expected tears. He expected guilt. But all he saw was relief. "Are you okay?" Simone Marcus asked softly. I looked at the empty driveway. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of winter and diesel, but to me it smelled like oxygen. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't carrying the weight of 4 other adults on my back. "I am better than okay, Marcus," I said. "I am done." I opened the car door and slid into the leather seat. "Cancel my meetings for next week," I told him, "and book me a flight to Paris. First class. Leaving tonight." "Paris?" Marcus asked, smiling. "Why Paris?" "Because I want to eat Thanksgiving dinner in a city where no one knows the name Freeman," I said. "And I want to do it alone." I started the engine of the Range Rover. The dashboard lit up, glowing with promise. I put the car in drive and pulled out of the estate. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing back there for me anymore. Just a pile of bricks that was about to be demolished and a family that had demolished itself. As I merged onto the highway, speeding toward the airport and toward the rest of my life, I realized that the greatest tragedy wasn't losing my family. The tragedy was that I hadn't done this sooner. I drove into the night, the city lights of Atlanta blurring into streaks of gold and red. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was free. If you are watching this, and you feel trapped by people who claim to love you while bleeding you dry, remember this. Family is not defined by blood. It is defined by respect. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away and never look back. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to choose your sanity over your family, let me know in the comments. You are not alone, and you are strong enough to survive the fallout.